On a clear early summer day in Bryce Canyon, the couple Logan Pierce and Maya Callahan vanished without a trace on a remote branch trail amid the towering red rock spires. For 2 years, people believed they had met with an accident or become victims of the harsh wilderness. But then, on a June afternoon, Logan suddenly reappeared on the edge of the town of Tropic, gaunt, panicked, and almost unrecognizable. The first words he uttered to the police stunned even seasoned investigators. Where had Logan been for those 2 years? And what really happened to Maya in the Bryce Canyon amphitheater? You'll find out in this video. Some names and details have been changed to protect identities and privacy. Before diving deeper into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the latest cases. That morning in Bryce Canyon began with the usual serene beauty. Slanting sunlight bathed the fiery orange hoodoo spires. The sky was clear blue, but far in the distance, thin streaks of cloud were already starting to stretch like silver threads, signaling a weather shift that only those familiar with the area would sense. Logan Pierce and Maya Callahan arrived at the trailhead, looking like ordinary tourists, carrying 2 light backpacks as if they planned to spend just a few hours sightseeing. However, the ranger on duty noticed something unusual between them. There was a quiet tension, not rising to an argument, no shouting or harsh words, but evident in the way Logan unconsciously kept his distance, and Maya followed with an inscrutable silence. The ranger described how their eyes rarely met, and when they did, it was only for a split second, as though both understood something remained unsaid. A group of hikers right behind them remembered Logan seeming slightly impatient, occasionally turning back to urge Maya along in a low voice that couldn't quite hide his irritation. Maya responded with very quiet words, sometimes just a slight nod, enough for Logan to hear, but not enough for anyone else to understand what was going on between them. Along the first stretch of the trail, other hikers unintentionally observed them too. They saw Logan walking ahead with quick, decisive strides, as if maintaining pace to avoid conversation. Maya would occasionally pause to lightly touch the rock railing, her gaze drifting down to the hoodoos below, as though lost in private thoughts. At times she lagged a few steps behind, standing still to take a deep breath before continuing. No one knew what was making her hesitate like that, but everyone agreed she didn't seem focused on the hike the way most visitors to Bryce Canyon are. As they moved deeper in, the wind began to pick up. Tiny red dust particles swirled into eddies, brushing across the trail like the canyon's rough breath. Sunlight was blocked by fast-moving clouds, shifting the landscape to muted tones and creating the feeling that the park was changing its mood, from gentle to warning. At the very moment the wind was strongest, Logan and Maya turned onto a little used side trail, where the terrain was steeper and the vegetation denser than usual. This wasn't one of the popular routes most visitors choose, and that caught the attention of a couple hiking farther back. They said they saw Maya quickly glance over her shoulder, her look not one of admiring the view, but more like checking for something, or someone. A flash of unease crossed her face before she lowered her head and hurried to catch up with Logan, who seemed completely unaware of her worry. That became the last image anyone still alive would see of them together in the majestic amphitheater of Bryce Canyon. As evening fell, the sky turned cold faster than usual. People in the cabin area said they never saw the two return. Both Logan's and Maya's phones were unreachable, giving only weak signals before going straight to voicemail. By late night, repeated calls from family members gradually turned into anxiety, and by the next morning, the unease exploded into undeniable reality. Logan Pierce and Maya Callahan had disappeared. Their families officially reported to police that the young couple had not returned from Bryce Canyon National Park. When the ranger force received the report from Logan and Maya's families, they immediately deployed the first response team to the area where the two were last seen. There was no time to entertain hypotheses about getting lost or bunking down somewhere overnight. The weather in Bryce Canyon is extremely unpredictable, and any delay could cause traces to disappear completely. The ranger team proceeded along the trail that witnesses had described, following the narrow path leading to the little-used side branch where the couple had turned before vanishing. Right in the first few meters, investigators noticed something unsettling. Their footprints appeared quite clearly on the ground, but they only extended to one point, and then vanished. No skid marks, no landing impressions, no signs whatsoever that they had turned back or veered off onto another path. Those shoe prints stopped abruptly in a way that no experienced investigator could take lightly. The terrain around this area appeared to have been recently disturbed, but instead of the chaotic scratching or trampling that wildlife usually leaves behind, the ground bore deep arc-shaped depressions with clear variations in soil compaction at each point, as though there had been a struggle, a pulling, or at the very least, a confrontation between 2 or 3 people. The rangers bent down to examine each depression closely, using rulers and pressure gauges to estimate weight, direction of movement, and the force of impact. Every indicator pointed to the same conclusion: this ground disturbance was not caused by wind or animals. This was human-made. While sweeping the edge of the trail, one ranger discovered an additional faint footprint, just clear enough to make out the overall shape, but not the detailed sole pattern. It did not match the size of Logan's or Maya's, not sharp enough to scan for sole tread identification, but its presence completely upended the initial hypothesis for the investigation team. If only Logan and Maya had entered this area, where did this third shoe print come from? And why was it right at the edge of the cliff, at an angle, as if the person had been standing to watch or wait? Meanwhile, the technical team rechecked every camera in the park, even though Bryce Canyon has far fewer cameras than other national parks. They reviewed every frame at the entrance gate, parking lots, main junctions, and nearby surveillance cameras. Logan and Maya were clearly recorded entering the park, but there was absolutely no footage showing them leaving. And even stranger, no unfamiliar person was seen entering the area of the side trail they had taken. No one following behind, no suspicious vehicles, no third figure matching that faint footprint. A complete paradox. The physical evidence at the scene indicated a third person, but the cameras flatly denied that person's existence. This contradiction forced investigators to immediately shift focus from missing due to accident to missing under unknown circumstances involving human factors. While reviewing the log records again, the night shift ranger captain reported that a tourist had called the information station, saying they had heard a small cry, like someone calling a name or a short reaction sound, coming from the eastern Hoodoo area. Though the sound was too brief to determine whether it was a call for help or just an echo from another group of hikers, it matched the direction where Logan and Maya were last seen, making this piece of information the first puzzle piece, marking an abnormal event that afternoon. The ranger team immediately expanded the search radius to the area of the cry. There, they discovered a strip of ground that was more deeply compacted than the surrounding areas, indicating that a person or object had applied significant downward force at that spot. Nearby were a few small rocks that appeared to have been kicked or pushed aside. Not enough to conclude a fight had taken place, but far too unusual to ignore. One investigator noted that if Logan and Maya had met with an accident, the traces should have spread along their direction of movement, but here the evidence was concentrated at stationary points, something that typically occurs when 2 or 3 people stop to face each other. The more traces they collected, the more the investigation team felt the situation did not match any typical hiking accident. No long skid marks, no rolling down cliff impressions, no dropped belongings, no prolonged cries, and especially, no subsequent direction of travel after the point of interruption. In a normal missing persons case, there should at least be some sign they tried to find their way back or sought water or shelter, but here, every trace stopped in absolute finality. That unnatural stillness prompted the ranger team leader to request an escalation in handling from search and rescue to potential criminal investigation. Investigators from Garfield County were called to the scene, bringing specialized equipment to analyze footprints, collect soil samples, measure compaction force, assess the degree of struggle, and determine the possibility of a third person. In the first internal report sent to superiors, the initial conclusion consisted of just 4 words: not an accident. And with that conclusion, the disappearance of Logan Pierce and Maya Callahan officially shifted from an unusual hiking incident to a different nature, one that no one on the investigation team had expected to confront that day. While the field survey team continued analyzing the soil, footprints and struggle area on the trail, another group of investigators was assigned to return to the parking lot, where Logan and Maya had left their silver SUV. When handling a disappearance with suspicious elements, checking the personal vehicle always plays a crucial role. It reveals behavior before the victims vanished, and it can even point to intentions they never voiced. The vehicle was immediately sealed and towed to the examination area. On the outside, there were no signs of forced entry, no fresh scratches, no unusual mud indicating someone had tried to break in or access it unauthorized. The doors were locked in automatic mode, showing that both Logan and Maya had left the vehicle in a normal state, not rushed, not hurried enough to forget to lock it. But when the technical team plugged in the data reader to the car's GPS system, things started to get strange. According to the GPS logs, Logan and Maya's trip stopped completely at exactly the moment they were last seen. There was no signal whatsoever, indicating they had tried to return to the vehicle, even in the late afternoon hours, leading into evening. For people lost in the park, the first instinct is usually to try to find their way back to where they started, and even if inaccurate, that would at least leave some search traces. But here, the vehicle's GPS data sat silent, as if the two had never intended to come back from the very beginning. This led investigators to ask, had they gone straight into the park only to never return, or had someone made certain they had no chance to return? When examining the interior closely, the investigation team found personal belongings completely intact, no mess, no signs of anyone rummaging through them. Jackets were still folded, water bottles were still full, the travel guidebook was still in the cloth bag behind the seat. Everything looked as though they had only stepped away for a few hours and planned to come right back, something that clearly never happened. However, the most important discovery was in the trunk. Inside was a paper map of Bryce Canyon, the kind tourists usually buy at the visitor center. Most of the routes were unmarked, but one small area, precisely the area where the third footprint appeared, had been circled in black marker, then heavily crossed out again, as if to erase or deny the original marking. Investigators carefully removed the map and spread it out on the examination table. The marker lines were dark and slightly bled into the paper, indicating the crossing out strokes were made with strong force, as though the person holding the pen was angry, hurried, or hesitant about something, and then changed their mind. The crossed-out location was an uncommon side trail, not in the top choices for ordinary tourists, not a route leading to famous viewpoints. In other words, it was not a place Logan and Maya would have chosen randomly. When cross-referencing the map with the path they had taken, investigators noticed an unsettling match. They had turned exactly onto the circled trail, as if they were heading to a meeting spot or a pre-designated area. This led to a significant hypothesis: either Logan and Maya had chosen that route themselves as part of their own plan, or someone had directed them there, through a message, instructions, or even a pre-arranged meeting set up before they entered the park. The investigation team continued analyzing the vehicle's interior, noting every small detail. The driver's seat position was not unusually adjusted, indicating Logan had been driving as usual. Maya's passenger seat was pulled closer to the wheel, fitting her build. No items were scattered, no signs anyone else had sat in the vehicle on the day of the incident. But when they examined the travel bag behind the driver's seat, they discovered a small folded piece of paper, not a typical note or receipt. It contained no clear words, just a symbol resembling directions, an arrow, and a few angular marks, looking very much like someone had quickly sketched a location or route. This symbol, when compared to the crossed-out map, pointed in the same direction. One experienced investigator, after observing the entire vehicle, said only one sentence: they didn't get lost, they were going to a specific place. And with the detail of the crossed-out map, combined with the completely silent GPS, the initial hypothesis was strengthened. Someone, or something, had caused Logan and Maya to turn onto exactly the side trail where the third footprint appeared. That turned their vehicle, originally seen as secondary evidence, into the center of a much larger suspicion. Because if someone was controlling their direction, then this disappearance was not simply an accident in a national park. It involved human intervention, and very likely a plan prepared in advance. As the investigation team expanded the search radius from the point where the footprints abruptly ended, they pushed deeper into the rugged terrain of the side trail, where the ground shifted to stepped ledges and narrow crevices intertwined. Bryce Canyon always creates complex terrain illusions. However, for a team thoroughly trained in trace analysis, the small details that ordinary people overlook are precisely what lead the way. And just a few dozen meters beyond the location corresponding to the crossed-out map, they came upon an area that made the entire team stop immediately. In front of them was a section of sandstone bearing long scratch marks, running from higher up downward for a short distance before stopping abruptly at the edge of a crevice. These scratch marks were not made by animals. They had a clear direction, gradually decreasing in depth from start to end, resembling marks from a heavy object being dragged, or a person sliding from a higher point while trying to grip the rock surface. Those gouges, even at a glance, were enough for investigators to understand that someone had lost their balance here, or been pushed or struck hard enough that they could no longer maintain their original standing position. Right beside them, the fine sand layer covering the rock base showed three distinct compressed areas. When measured precisely with rulers, the depth and compression direction varied, but their positions formed a closed triangle. The entire team quickly measured each area. Two of them matched the length and stride distance consistent with Logan and Maya's measurements, based on the shoes they wore on the day they disappeared. These were clearer, sharper traces, because they had stood right at the slipperiest section. However, the third compressed area was larger, longer, and slightly offset toward the rock edge, a typical sign of a man taller than Logan, or at least wearing significantly larger shoes. The third mark was not as clear as the other two, but that did not make it less important. On the contrary, the faintness only proved that this person had stood for a shorter time, or moved faster than the other two. This fit the hypothesis. The third person was not passively caught in the situation, but was actively approaching. When investigators reconstructed the model of the three standing positions, the orientation of each compression showed all three were facing inward toward each other. There were no signs they were standing along the normal direction of travel on the trail. They were standing face to face, forming a tight triangle, as if three people were talking, arguing, or confronting one another. And within that triangle, the person in the third position was significantly closer to the edge than the other two, a position that could only have been deliberately taken. This, combined with the scratches behind, painted an undeniable crime scene picture. Here a tense interaction had occurred between three people, leading to a slip or a fall, whose consequences could not yet be determined. The investigation team continued to thoroughly examine the surrounding area. Normally, if someone slipped off an area like this, they would leave hand grabs in the dirt or rock, or drag marks from their feet. But here, aside from the gouges on the rock, there was virtually nothing. No backpacks, no water bottles, no phones, no belongings whatsoever that could be linked to Logan or Maya. Wind could blow away footprints, but it could not blow away a backpack or any weighted object. The deeper they went, the stronger the sense of abnormality became. What particularly caught the investigation team's attention was the absolute cleanliness of the area. A natural fall would normally cause chaos, scattered rock fragments, broken dry branches, churned up ground. But here, the ground appeared edited, or at least lacked the spread of traces a real accident would have. The investigators were therefore forced to ask if someone fell into the crevice, where were the landing traces? If there was a scuffle, why did the area not reflect strong impact force? And most importantly, three people had stood here, but in which direction did they leave? The compressed areas behind the triangle did not lead to any clear escape route, they simply vanished. As if the three people had stood there, scuffled or argued, and then left no further traces at all. An uneasy feeling spread through the team. The area did not look like a scene abandoned by nature, but like one that had been wiped clean by human hands. One veteran investigator slowly remarked, "Two people missing, and a third person present, but we only have their traces left, not them." And with the absolute absence of backpacks, personal items, or any clear physical evidence, the investigation team understood they had reached the boundary between an ordinary disappearance and something far more complex, something that may have begun right where those three footprints stood close together in this narrow crevice. After discovering the three standing positions in the crevice, and the faint third footprint still imprinted in the sand, the investigation team expanded the sweep to nearby trails. Although this area was remote, Bryce Canyon always has small scattered groups of hikers appearing here and there, and hope remained of finding indirect witnesses. They began by reviewing the list of people who entered and left the park within the time frame when Logan and Maya were believed to have disappeared. This list was cross-referenced with ticket sales data, vehicle tracking logs, and ranger notes at the gate. From there, they narrowed down 4 groups of visitors who were most likely near the confrontation area. When contacted, most of them had nothing unusual to offer. But with the third group, a young hiking couple from Colorado, the investigation took a completely different turn. The man in the group said he did not personally see Logan or Maya, but he clearly remembered what he heard while passing through a narrow section a few hundred meters from the area of the rock scratches, a man's voice shouting loudly, decisively, almost like giving an order. According to his description, the voice was not a cry for help, but the voice of someone trying to dominate or threaten another person. The sentence he heard was only 3 words: "Don't turn back." The volume echoed off the sandstone walls, distorting the tone slightly, but it was unmistakable, a harsh, rough shout, not normal conversation between 2 people arguing. What drew the investigation team's attention even more was the witness's demeanor. He stated clearly, that voice didn't sound like someone scared. It sounded like someone ordering someone else around. From his gut feeling, he believed the words were said in a tense situation. It was not Logan's voice, based on descriptions from friends and family, and it was not the voice of any hiker he and his girlfriend had encountered that afternoon. This information was immediately added to the scene report, becoming the first crucial piece confirming the presence of a third person, not part of any registered visitor group on the route. When investigators asked why he hadn't reported it that day, the young hiker answered honestly, "Echoes happen all the time out here. I didn't think it was serious until you asked." Following that tense testimony, the investigation team continued searching for other witnesses who might have seen something unusual. A middle-aged woman from Nevada, hiking alone that same afternoon, reported that she had seen a figure standing on the eastern rock ridge right around the time the wind began picking up. At first, she thought it was a photographer looking for a sunset shot. But what stuck with her was that the figure stood completely still, no turning with a camera, no movement, just looking down at the trail area below, as if watching someone. She described, the person was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing dark clothing, not like a regular tourist. When investigators asked if it could have been Logan, she answered firmly, "No, that person was bigger, standing in a different way." Her description of different was explored further. The person on the ridge stood straight, shoulders squared, arms at the sides, not relaxed or shifting like a tourist taking in the view. It was the posture of someone observing, not someone casually enjoying the scenery. This was the first witness to directly link a mysterious figure to the area where Logan and Maya disappeared. However, the immediate challenge was the paradox that had existed from the start of the case. All cameras near the entrance and exit areas during that time frame recorded no dark-clothed man, no vehicle or group matching her description. Bryce Canyon is not a place crowded with cameras like a city, but essential points still have surveillance equipment. Based on the camera data, the third person, whoever he was, did not enter in the usual way. Either he entered the park long before Logan and Maya, or he entered through an unofficial route that only someone familiar with the terrain would know. When investigators compared the 2 witnesses' statements, one common point stood out. Both the shout and the figure on the ridge were oriented toward the area where the team had found the 3 footprints forming a triangle. Furthermore, when analyzing the ridge position where the woman saw the figure standing, the line of sight matched exactly the location of the rock scratches, a spot very difficult to observe unless one knew precisely where to look. This raised strong suspicion that the person on the ridge was not there by chance. That person knew where to look down. The investigation team then began expanding the case file, adding an official note, "Disappearance involves human intervention." This was no longer speculation. The presence of the shout, the mysterious figure, the third footprint, and the confrontation scene all reinforced that conclusion. And with this conclusion, the disappearance at Bryce Canyon had shifted from a possible natural incident to a far more complex scenario, one that the investigation team understood they had only just begun to scratch the surface of. While the field team compiled witness statements and analyzed traces at the crevice, a separate group of investigators specializing in digital data continued extracting the remaining information from Logan and Maya's personal devices. Both of their phones lost signal right after they went deeper into the side trail, but many apps today have automatic cloud sync features when connected to a network earlier. And that very feature opened a major hole in the got lost hypothesis, which was still being considered in the early stages of the investigation. The technical team started with Logan's smartwatch, the device he almost always wore while hiking. Although the watch was no longer connected, the data before the signal loss had still synced to his account. When analyzing the full recorded route from the afternoon Logan and Maya disappeared, investigators realized that Logan's movement was completely inconsistent with the behavior of someone who was lost. The data showed Logan veering off the main trail in a smooth curve, no zigzagging, no sudden stops followed by turnarounds, no erratic movements indicating confusion. This contrasted sharply with the typical behavior seen in people disoriented in difficult terrain. They usually circle, pause, head back the way they came, then change direction again. But Logan was different. His path looked like he was heading to a specific, intentional point, not turning off by chance. Even more importantly, according to the watch's GPS data, Logan began leaving the main trail before the two witnesses heard the shout, "Don't turn back." That meant the decision to turn was not due to panic, being chased, or fleeing. It was part of a planned sequence of actions. When investigators overlaid Logan's route with the paper map found in the trunk, the map with the circled and then crossed out section, the match forced the entire team to set aside the accident hypothesis for the moment. Logan did not go wrong. He went exactly onto the side trail that had been marked beforehand. This raised a possibility no one wanted to consider. They had been guided, directed, or even arranged to meet at the very place where the third person's footprint appeared. But the biggest question was Logan doing it willingly, or was he being lured? The answer was not in his device, but it appeared in a completely different piece of evidence. During the collection of personal items at Logan and Maya's cabin, investigators found a small leather-bound journal in Maya's purse. This was something Maya rarely left behind when traveling far, according to close friends. At first, the investigation team viewed it as unrelated personal notes, but when reviewing the pages closest to the time they arrived at Bryce Canyon, certain entries made them stop. In a few short lines, Maya wrote that she felt someone was following her in recent weeks. She described feeling watched while grocery shopping, while standing in the company parking lot, and even at the gym. She did not name anyone, did not claim she was being threatened, but the tone was tense, the handwriting slightly shaky. Those entries were not explicit, lacked specific evidence, but they forced the investigation team to re-examine the entire context of the disappearance. Because if Maya truly sensed someone following her, and Logan turned off the trail toward a pre-marked direction, then the incident at Bryce Canyon could no longer be seen as an ordinary accident. When investigators connected Maya's journal to the crossed-out map in the trunk, along with the third footprint at the scene, a new pattern began to emerge. Logan and Maya did not just accidentally go off course. They had stepped onto a path that someone or something had calculated for them in advance. The next question, did Logan know or not? This became a point of debate within the investigation team. The GPS data showed Logan moving purposefully, but Maya's journal indicated only she sensed danger. That opened two possibilities. Logan led Maya into that area without her knowing, or both were secretly followed and lured by someone. One experienced investigator remarked, if someone was following them, that person knew Logan's tech habits, knew how to avoid leaving traces on cameras, and knew exactly when they left the main trail. This was not random. The GPS data proving Logan was not lost, combined with Maya's journal recording her fear of being followed, officially shifted the investigation direction toward the likelihood that they were not wandering but were led, or forced to the side trail where the third person's footprint appeared. The more they analyzed, the more certain the investigation team became. The disappearance at Bryce Canyon was not simply two people vanishing in the vast wilderness. There was a human hand behind what happened, and the traces of that hand appeared most clearly in Logan's unusual movement path, and the quiet unease Maya had written down in the final pages of her journal. In the following days, the search and investigation team continued to scour every nook and cranny of Bryce Canyon in hopes of finding any physical trace that could explain what had happened. They combed through every crevice, every side path, every windswept barren patch, but even with thermal drones, ground-penetrating scanners, search dogs, and professional mountain rescue teams, the results remained the same. No bodies, no new leads, no trace leading to the next step. Bryce Canyon is a place beautiful enough to take your breath away, but cruel in its own way. The sheer cliffs make accessing many areas nearly impossible. Strong winds erase traces in just a few hours. Layers of red dust constantly shift, causing footprints, drag marks, or scratches on the ground to vanish quickly as if they had never existed. Small rock slide zones can swallow a person whole and bury everything completely with just a few random sandstone blocks falling. Those factors made the investigation team understand that if Logan or Maya, or both, had fallen into a deep crevice unseen, the chances of ever finding them were close to zero. They re-examined the hypotheses: slipping and falling, being hit by falling rocks, separating from each other and getting lost, or hiding during weather changes. But each hypothesis hit a dead end when compared to the scene. None of their personal items turned up, no backpacks were found, no scraps of fabric, no signs of cutting or tearing caught on branches, no water bottle left along the way, something rare in disappearances, where victims usually drop or are forced to abandon some belongings during an incident. Even electronic devices, often located in missing persons cases, thanks to weak signals or light reflection, never appeared. Everything related to Logan and Maya stopped completely at the point with the triangular footprints and the scratched rock area. Not a single detail extended beyond that spot. The investigators, despite their extensive expertise, had to admit that this disappearance had too many gaps to reach a clear conclusion. The third footprint appeared, but it was not enough to identify the person or their actions. The shout "Don't turn back" was heard by witnesses, but there was no audio recording or camera confirmation. The suspicious figure standing on the ridge existed, but appeared on no cameras. Maya's journal might suggest she feared someone was following her, but it did not prove that fear was connected to Bryce Canyon. The crossed-out map and Logan's GPS route showed purposeful direction, but they were only incomplete pieces. Each detail could be important, but none was strong enough to stand alone and launch a criminal case. After 3 weeks of continuous operations, the large-scale search had to be scaled back, not due to lack of determination, but because Bryce Canyon, with its harsh climate and treacherous terrain, had erased nearly all human traces. At the final summary meeting, representatives from the investigation team, the county sheriff, and the ranger force reviewed the entire file together: maps, footprints, statements, digital data, scene photos. In the end, a shared conclusion was reached: not enough signs of crime, but it also could not be treated as a normal accident. The official report conclusion stated clearly: status suspicious disappearance. Case transferred to cold case status pending new leads. This meant the case was not fully closed, but no longer actively investigated daily. It was stored in the list of unsolved disappearances, where only a new piece of information, emerging evidence, or an unexpected confession could reopen the search. The information board at the Bryce Canyon checkpoint kept photos of Logan and Maya for many months afterward. The rangers on gate duty still looked at them every morning, wondering if there was any detail they had missed on the first day the two walked into the park. Logan and Maya's families continued visiting the ranger station regularly, hoping someone had seen something they did not know about. But time passed, and Bryce Canyon remained as silent as ever. And in that silence, the disappearance of Logan Pierce and Maya Callahan officially sank into the cold region of the files, a true cold case, with no answers, and no clear path forward to keep following. 2 years passed since the day Logan Pierce and Maya Callahan vanished in Bryce Canyon, So much time had gone by that even the most persistent investigators finally had to accept that the case might never be solved. Bryce Canyon kept its habit, swallowing every trace and leaving behind a silence that chilled to the bone. The families of the two, though they never gave up hope, had grown exhausted from the absence of any concrete sign. Life seemed frozen at the moment they disappeared, but the world kept moving forward, until one windy afternoon 2 years later, when everything suddenly shifted. A group of truck drivers, passing through the road near the small town of Tropic, Utah, happened to spot a man staggering along the shoulder. At first they thought he was a local drunk or a tourist in distress. But as they got closer, the man's face, gaunt, pale, eyes sunken, as if he had just endured something horrific, made them all stop their trucks immediately. His clothes were torn to shreds, he was barefoot, his skin sunburned in patchy red blotches. Fresh cuts on his arms and shoulders were still oozing blood, not yet scabbed over. His hair was long, matted, and stiff, as though he had been walking under sun and wind for days on end. But the most shocking thing was not that depleted appearance, it was the face. One driver recognized it instantly, and gasped, barely able to breathe. "That's Logan Pierce." For 2 whole years, that name had only existed on missing person flyers, in cold case reports, and during the quiet memorial gatherings held by the families. Yet now, he was standing right in front of them, alive, but nothing like any version of the man who had vanished among the red hoodoos. Tropic police were called immediately. Logan did not run, nor did he seem agitated by their arrival. He just stood there, breathing heavily, eyes unfocused on anyone. When an officer approached and asked if he was okay, Logan slowly turned his head, as if it took a moment to register that someone was speaking to him. His lips were cracked and dry, almost unable to part. A few seconds later, he spoke a sentence that everyone on scene would later remember word for word. "I know you guys have been looking for Maya." His voice was hoarse, weak, but clear enough to freeze everyone present. For 2 years, there had been no information about Logan or Maya. Both were presumed dead, though no bodies were found. And now, Logan had appeared, alone, with his very first words mentioning Maya, as if she were still out there, somewhere just out of sight. He was immediately taken to the small town hospital. When doctors examined him, they quickly realized that Logan's physical condition did not match at all what one would expect from someone believed to have survived in the wilderness for 2 years. The wounds on his skin were fresh, only a few days old. Bruises around his ribs were still deep purple, signs of recent impact. His feet were cracked, but lacked the thick calluses of someone who had walked or wandered for months on end. Even his fingernails were intact, not broken or torn as they would be in someone who had struggled against harsh elements long term. One doctor later told investigators, "He looks like someone who just escaped from something, not like a person who lived off roots and rainwater for 2 years." As soon as Logan was stable enough to talk, police and the Special Investigation Task Force contacted the hospital right away. They could not miss any information. The disappearance, once considered a cold case, had changed status in the minutes since Logan appeared. When an investigator asked where he had been all this time, Logan did not answer immediately. He stared at the hospital room ceiling, eyes out of focus, as if trying to pull some image from memory. Then he whispered, barely loud enough for the investigation team to hear, "I don't know where I was 2 years ago, but I know what happened right before everything went away." The investigator immediately asked Logan to explain more, but he only shook his head, his face paling. When they mentioned Maya, Logan reacted strongly. His body twitched slightly, as though the memory of her caused deeper pain than any physical wound. He gripped the edge of the bed, hands trembling, then said slowly, word by word, "I still hear her." That statement instantly plunged the room into absolute silence. No one on the investigation team knew what Logan meant, a call, a scream, or a voice from memory. Whatever it was enough for them to understand that his mental state was extremely fragile. The initial medical report noted that Logan showed signs of acute stress disorder, mild dehydration, severe sleep deprivation, and multiple recent soft tissue injuries. But there were no signs whatsoever that he had survived alone in the wilderness for 2 years. This opened a whole new set of questions. Where had Logan been during the entire time he was missing? Who caused the fresh wounds on his body? Who or what made him appear near Tropic, miles from Bryce Canyon? And most importantly, where was Maya? When news that Logan had been found reached the county investigation office, the cold case file for the Logan, Maya disappearance was reopened that same day. All the investigators who had once worked themselves to exhaustion on the case were called back. The old notes, scene maps, photos of the triangular footprints, the scratches on the rock, witness statements about the shout and the figure on the ridge, everything was pulled out and placed on the table again. For the first time in 2 years, Logan became the most crucial witness, the only person who could know what happened that afternoon when the two turned onto the little-used side trail. But the major problem was that Logan might not know, or no longer remember, exactly what had taken place. Every time he was asked about the moments right before they vanished, his expression changed, as if that memory held something he could not or did not want to touch. When one investigator asked a short, direct question, "What is the last thing you remember about Maya?" Logan simply closed his eyes, breathed rapidly, then said in a voice full of fear, "I heard her calling." Then everything went black. No one knew what that statement meant. Was it a literal description, or a memory distorted by 2 years of psychological turmoil? But clearly, Logan Pierce, the man who had vanished in Bryce Canyon, had now returned, and that return brought no answers, only countless new questions that had never been asked before. The lead investigator wrote a short line in the case reopening report. Logan Pierce returned. Condition abnormal. Deep interrogation required. Case reopened. And from that moment, the disappearance of Logan and Maya was no longer a cold file gathering dust in a cabinet. It had come back to life, because of the return of the very person everyone thought had vanished forever with Bryce Canyon. As soon as Logan Pierce recovered enough to speak in a more alert state, the special investigation team from Garfield County was dispatched to the Tropic Hospital to take his initial statement. They did not want to wait. Any information in Logan's memory could fade very quickly, especially for someone who had just gone through 2 years of disappearance under unknown survival conditions. In the temporary interview room set up at the hospital, Logan sat upright, but his hands gripped the edges of the chair tightly. The white overhead lights reflected off his pale, exhausted face. One investigator turned on the recorder, then gently asked, "Can you tell us exactly the last thing you remember when you were in Bryce Canyon?" Logan swallowed hard, his unsteady eyes staring into empty space before answering, "Maya. She slipped. She lost her balance, and then disappeared down a small cliff." The investigator immediately flagged that statement. "Small cliff. How far did you see her fall?" I'm not sure. I heard rocks clashing, then silence." At that moment, Logan's statement sounded reasonable for a normal accident, but the investigators who had worked on the disappearance 2 years earlier all frowned. They had checked every trail edge, every cliff in the area where Logan and Maya were last seen. There was no location that matched that description. Another investigator probed deeper. "Can you describe that area? The specific spot, the shape of the rocks, the slope, any landmarks around it?" Logan closed his eyes for a few seconds, then spoke as if recalling a faint memory. "It was a narrow section. The wind was very strong. There was a juniper tree right on the right side." Maya stepped sideways when avoiding a slippery rock. The people in the room exchanged glances. All three details, the narrow section, the juniper tree on the right, the slippery rock, did not exist in the actual terrain. When the team pulled up the terrain files and photos from the search 2 years earlier, they saw a major problem. The section Logan described did not belong to the area of Bryce Canyon, where the two were last recorded. The investigator stayed calm and continued. "Was it raining that day, Logan?" He answered immediately, "Yes, light rain. The rocks were wet, that's why Maya slipped." That answer officially pushed the entire team into suspicion. Because meteorological forensics had already analyzed the weather data from that day, there was no rain anywhere in the entire area. Extremely low humidity, strong but dry winds, clear skies, nothing sufficient to create the slippery rock surface Logan described. One investigator noted in the report, "Statement inconsistent with meteorological data. indication of fabrication. When asked to describe the direction of Maya's fall, Logan gestured downward at an angle that made no sense. The angle he indicated was from a position where, if Maya had truly slipped, she would have fallen onto the trail itself, not disappeared as he claimed. And according to the automatic GPS data from Logan's watch, neither he nor Maya had been near any small cliff edge at that time. Then the forensics team from the original scene reported initial findings from the old site, where the third footprint had appeared 2 years earlier. No long skid marks, no shoe scuffs or drags on the rock, no sections of rock chipped away as would happen from a person falling, no soil samples showing recent gravitational pull. One forensic technician stated bluntly, if someone slipped the way Logan described, there would be at least one long skid mark on the rock surface. There isn't any. Absolutely none. The team returned to questioning Logan. Where exactly did you see Maya slip? Please sketch it on paper. Logan took the pen and drew a curving line leading to a rock edge. When that sketch was placed next to the actual terrain map, the mismatch was almost total. He described a location that did not exist, a landform Bryce Canyon has never had, as if he had never stood there. One investigator said directly, Logan, the location you're describing doesn't match any area in the park. Are you sure you're remembering correctly? Logan became visibly tense, his chest started heaving, sweat beaded on both temples. I don't remember exactly. But Maya fell. I saw it. But forensics concluded the opposite. No one fell in that area. There were no traces of any slip whatsoever. Logan's statement continued to have issues when he said, after Maya fell, I climbed down to look for her. I followed a steep rock path downward, but the 3D terrain map from the original search showed no downward path at the area where they vanished. No way down, no lower rock ledge, just a stable flat surface for dozens of meters in every direction. Clearly, Logan was describing a place that did not exist. The lead investigator closed his notebook, looked at him for a long moment, then said in a calm but sharp tone, Logan, your statement has many inconsistencies. The location you describe, the weather you mention, the slip you talk about, none of it matches the actual evidence. Do you want to revise your statement? Logan fell silent. A silence so long you could hear the air conditioning. Finally, he said a sentence that the investigator underlined in red ink. There are things I can't remember. Things I'm not sure are memories, or something else. Everyone in the room exchanged unreadable glances. Logan Pierce, the only surviving witness, was turning into someone providing inconsistent, illogical, factually inaccurate testimony. The final note from the initial interview session concluded, Logan Pierce, unreliable witness, statement contains numerous gaps, signs of concealment or deliberate distortion. And from that moment, Logan was no longer simply the surviving victim who had returned. He had become an unpredictable variable, a person who might know the truth, but was telling a completely different version instead. As Logan's statements began to reveal increasingly large inconsistencies, the investigation team knew they had to rely on objective data, rather than the memory of someone who had just gone through 2 years of unclear circumstances. For the first time in 2 years, they were granted access to the wearable devices that once belonged to Logan, the GPS watch, the health tracker, and the automatically synced data that he had no idea his phone had still stored before completely losing signal. A digital technician pulled up the report and said a sentence that made everyone sit up straight. Logan did not vanish from the system immediately. Heart rate and movement data continued recording right up to the moment of the event. The lead investigator requested the full heart rate chart from the day Logan and Maya disappeared. On the large screen appeared a data sequence lasting more than an hour before the signal cut off. The early minutes were stable, completely consistent with a couple hiking at a steady pace. But then, suddenly, a sharp spike in heart rate. One technician explained, Logan's heart rate jumped from 98 to 148 in less than 20 seconds. This isn't the rate of someone climbing a hill, this is the rate of someone in panic or intense argument. A heavy silence fell over the room. Argument. Panic? Who caused him to panic? The investigator flipped back through the statement. Logan had never mentioned an argument. He had said nothing about any conflict before Maya slipped. But the data told a different truth. At the moment Logan claimed everything was still normal, his heart rate had suddenly skyrocketed to alarming levels. It could be from seeing Maya slip, a younger officer suggested. The technician shook his head immediately. No, the heart rate spike occurred before the GPS signal stopped, and before the time he described Maya falling. There's a gap of several minutes. That meant Logan had reacted to a completely different stressful event, one he never mentioned in his statement. But the report did not stop there. The technician switched to movement data. This is the strangest part. After the heart rate peak, the watch recorded Logan standing completely still. The entire room was stunned. How long was he still? The investigator asked. A total of 12 minutes, without moving even half a step. At exactly which location? The technician zoomed in on the GPS map. A red dot appeared, exactly the spot where forensics had found the third footprint 2 years earlier. The faint strange print that belonged to neither Logan nor Maya. The print that had shifted the original investigation toward the possibility of another person at the scene when the young couple disappeared. The lead investigator set down his pen. His voice low but clear. He didn't go after Maya. He was standing still, facing someone. The room went quiet for several seconds. Logan stood motionless for 12 minutes. A panicked person would not stand still. A person searching for a girlfriend who had slipped would not stand still. But a person facing someone, or a situation that restrained him, might. Another technician added, the heart rate frequency, during those 12 minutes of stillness did not drop. It stayed elevated, sign of extreme stress while completely immobile. No one in the room needed to say what everyone was thinking. Logan was not telling the truth. When they returned to the interview room, Logan had recovered somewhat. He was no longer trembling as before, but his eyes still clouded over when Maya's name was mentioned. The investigator pulled up the data screen. Logan, we have data from your wearable device. Can you explain why you stood completely still for 12 minutes at the exact spot where the third footprint appeared? Logan stared at the chart, as if it were written in a language he did not understand. I stood still. I don't remember stopping that long. The investigator did not interrupt, just continued to the next segment. The heart rate spike. Do you remember arguing with Maya? Logan hesitated slightly. A small twitch at the corner of his eye showed discomfort. We talked, but it wasn't an argument. But your heart rate says otherwise. Logan looked down at his hands. I don't know why it was like that. The investigator's tone sharpened. Logan, are you hiding something about the third person at the scene? This time the reaction was clearer. Logan looked up, eyes wide, confused and afraid. Third person, he repeated. Yes, the investigator said. We have a third footprint, and your heart rate spiked when you were facing someone. Logan, who was there with you too. Logan took a deep breath, both hands clenching tightly. He was silent for a long moment, as if struggling between memory and an unnamed fear. Then he said something no one expected. We weren't alone. That sentence demolished all previous assumptions. It wasn't just Logan and Maya. It wasn't just an accidental slip. It wasn't just getting lost. The investigator immediately asked, who was that person? Did you know them? Logan shook his head. No, I don't know the name, but that person was with us, or following behind. The second sentence was fragmented, contradictory, but the meaning was crystal clear. Someone had appeared very early in the journey. The investigator pressed, why didn't you mention this in your first statement? Logan bit his lip, eyes fixed on the corner of the room as if someone were standing there. Because I'm not sure what I remember is real, because everything felt like it was erased. A forensic technician typed rapidly, recording it. The lead investigator nodded slightly, placed a photo of the third footprint on the table, voice low. Logan, what you just said changes everything. From now on, the focus of the investigation will be the third person. But at the end of their internal report that day was an additional line. Logan Pierce, possible memory distortion, manipulation, or influence by another party. Deep psychological evaluation required. No one said it out loud, but everyone understood. The third person, the one still absent, nameless, faceless, had now become the central figure in the entire case. And Logan Pierce, though returned, had become more mysterious than ever. After Logan admitted, "We weren't alone," the investigation team expanded the search radius around the third footprint area once again. 2 years earlier, at the time they halted the search, technology was limited, manpower was thin, and the terrain had been wiped clean by wind. But this time was different. They had newly analyzed GPS data, Logan's statement, however vague, and especially a clear investigative direction on the third person. The forensics team, along with experienced rangers, was dispatched to the crevice area where the third footprint had once appeared. Bryce Canyon at this time had stronger winds, with the ground surface exposing more eroded sections, revealing patches of unusually colored soil. One ranger bent down and noticed a layer of freshly peeled soil, just a few centimeters thick, signs it had been dug up and hastily refilled. 2 years later, nature had done the rest. A forensics technician used a soil probe to check for voids. Just a few inches down, the probe hit something softer than dirt. Investigators immediately cordoned off the area, donned gloves, and used specialized brushes to sift through layer after layer of red dust. Less than 10 minutes later, a corner of milky white nylon emerged. "Stop, bag it sterile." The order was given immediately. They carefully lifted the nylon bag and placed it into an evidence container. The bag had been buried for quite some time, but was still intact, except for the mouth of the bag, which had been slashed with a single clean, sharp cut. The technician recognized it right away. "This is a sharp knife cut, not an animal." When the bag was opened in the mobile clean room set up right near the scene, the entire team fell silent. Inside the bag was a woman's shirt torn forcefully at the shoulder, several long hairs stuck to the inner nylon layer, a ring of red dust around the shirt hem, matching the soil dust from this very crevice, and a folded into quarters piece of paper, damp, but with legible writing on the paper. Just one line, written in ink-smudged ballpoint pen: "Don't let him know." The entire scene plunged into a thick, palpable silence, only the wind whistling through the hoodoos, as if repeating those words. The lead investigator furrowed his brow tightly. Who wrote this? Who is him? And why leave this bag here? The forensics profiler opened the shirt bag, checked the label and stitching. It only took a few minutes to confirm. This is Maya Callahan's shirt. Matches the clothing in photos provided by the family. When the hairs were preliminarily examined under a magnifying glass, the length and distinctive brown color made everyone understand who they belonged to, even without DNA results. But the most suspicious thing was not the torn shirt, not the hair, not the paper, it was the way the nylon bag was slashed. Forensics initial report: the cut is too clean, made with a sharp knife, thin blade, not a typical multi-tool. The investigator asked immediately, "What kind of knife?" Forensics projected a matching image. "This cut is compatible with the Buck 112 folding knife, clip point blade. That type of knife rarely leaves such a fine cut." One investigator in the group immediately recalled a detail from the old file. "Wait, Logan Pierce once owned a buck knife. His father gave it to him when Logan was in college." The entire room turned to look at each other. Was that knife found when searching Logan's belongings? No. In the inventory of personal items collected from the cabin, kitchen utensils, hiking gear, no such knife. Missing knife. A nylon bag slashed with the type of knife Logan once owned. A piece of paper saying, "Don't let him know." Maya's torn shirt. Maya's hair. All buried deep at the exact spot where the third footprint was found. Investigative logic began to take shape. Not a single detail in the nylon bag matched Logan's statement that Maya slipped accidentally. The lead investigator sealed the evidence bag. This means someone tried to hide Maya's belongings, or someone wanted to leave a message, and that line, "him," could be Logan, or someone in the group of 3. A local ranger interjected, "If Maya wrote it, it means she knew the third person. If the third person wrote it, it means he didn't want Logan to know something. And if Logan wrote, he trailed off." No one wanted to consider that possibility. But the investigation ruled out no direction. Right after the evidence was photographed and sealed, the investigation team returned to Tropic Hospital. Logan was asked to look at the torn shirt. His reaction happened in a few seconds and drew everyone's attention. He looked at the shirt then recoiled, shoulders shaking, lips stiffening, as if unable to speak. I don't remember this. I don't know where that bag came from. The investigator placed a photo of the cut in front of him. Logan, do you recognize this type of cut? He hesitated. Looks like a pocket knife, the kind I used to use hiking. But your knife wasn't found. What did you do with it? I don't remember. The lead investigator turned to the forensics team. Verify fingerprints on the paper, verify DNA on the shirt and hair, and check what type of soil is in the bag. Meanwhile, a technician quietly whispered to his superior. The burial depth of this bag was only about 4 to 5 inches, meaning buried hastily, not for long-term concealment, like someone left a signal, or a warning. The lead investigator nodded slightly, eyes sharpening. A message, but for whom, and for what purpose? In the internal report submitted at the end of the day, there was only one short but earth-shaking section: nylon bag containing victim Maya Callahan's belongings, buried at the third footprint location. The line "Don't let him know" suggests a hidden connection between victim, suspect, and third person. Cut compatible with Buck 112 knife. Model Logan Pierce once owned but missing from cabin. Need to determine who buried this bag, when, and why. The disappearance case, frozen 2 years earlier, was no longer a vague mystery. It had traces, physical evidence, a message left by human hands, and this meant, on the day they vanished, there were 3 people, not 2, deep in Bryce Canyon. While the lab was analyzing the nylon bag found in the crevice, a completely unexpected development occurred. An old witness from 2023, the time when the disappearance had just been frozen into a cold case, suddenly reached out to police again. This person was Ruth Hernandez, 59 years old, an experienced hiker, who had submitted a vague tip 2 years earlier, then faded from the file because she wasn't sure she heard correctly. But now, when news of Logan's return and information about the nylon bag were circulated internally, Ruth called the ranger station with just one sentence: "It's time I spoke clearly." Investigators immediately met her at the Bryce Canyon Visitor Center. The woman was thin, with a lot of gray hair, sharp but tense eyes. She held a battered hiking journal, the place she had noted every trip for decades. "I thought I was mistaken back then," Ruth said right at the start, "but when I saw on the news that Logan Pierce had returned, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore." The investigator asked what she remembered about that day. Ruth opened the journal, flipped to the page from the day Logan and Maya disappeared. The handwritten scrawl was messy, but still legible. "Strange sounds near the eastern Hoodoos area. 3 voices, not sure." She took a deep breath. "Now I'm sure." The entire room went quiet. She had heard 3 voices, not 2. Ruth explained that on that afternoon, she was hiking alone along the Peekaboo Loop, about half a mile, as the crow flies from where Logan and Maya were last seen. Strong winds usually shredded sounds, but at one point, when she stood in a low spot between 2 hoodoo pillars, echoes carried clearly. "I heard a woman's voice," she said. "High-pitched, anxious. I think it could have been Maya." The investigator pulled up the map and pointed to her position. She nodded in confirmation. Then Ruth continued, "I heard a younger man's voice. I assumed it was Logan saying something like, 'It's okay, slow down.' His voice was tense, not exactly shouting, but loud enough to echo off the rocks." Up to this point, the account fit the file perfectly, but Ruth wasn't finished. About 10 seconds later, there was a third voice. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The investigator asked quietly, "The third voice, what exactly was it like?" Ruth closed her eyes for a few seconds, as if recalling every tone, lower, rougher, the voice of someone used to giving orders. "I clearly heard one sentence: 'Keep going, don't turn back.' Not spoken gently, not with worry. It was a command." That sentence froze everyone. It was identical to the sentence another witness had vaguely reported 2 years earlier. "Don't turn back." But back then, no one believed it. Wind, falling rocks, other tourists, easy to mishear. But now, with the buried nylon bag carrying the message, "Don't let him know," and with the third footprint, Ruth's statement was no longer an isolated detail. It was the perfect fitting piece. The investigator asked, "Did you hear any sounds of a struggle or scuffle?" Ruth shook her head. "No, just 3 voices, then silence." Another investigator asked the key question. At that moment, did you hear footsteps running or moving? She hesitated slightly. I heard one thud like a rock being kicked hard, but very brief. And I heard heavy breathing, from only one person. Only one person. Yes, just one, not two, not three. What did that mean? If Ruth was not mistaken, and she insisted she was certain, after the command, only one of the three was still moving vigorously. For the first time the investigation confirmed the presence of the third person. The case file recorded Ruth's statement as follows. 1. She heard 3 distinct voices. 2. The third voice was giving orders, not conversing. 3. After the command, only one person was heard moving strongly. 4. No accident sounds as Logan described. 5. No desperate scream from Maya. This completely shattered Logan's account. Maya did not slip. There was no sound of falling. It was not just 2 people together, and absolutely not an accident. A younger investigator whispered, someone else was there. Someone who made Logan scared enough to stand still for 12 minutes. Ruth looked around the room, and added one more noteworthy detail. The person with the third voice sounded very close, not echoing from far away. The distance of the voice was almost within a few meters. That meant when Ruth heard it, the 3 people were standing close together, and worse, the third voice was commanding enough that Logan and Maya did not dare resist. The investigator asked the final question. Can you confirm the volume and direction of the third voice? Ruth nodded. I can point exactly where I heard it from. When she stood up and pointed on the map, the investigator marked it. The spot she indicated matched the area where the buried nylon bag was found. Everyone in the room understood immediately. This was not coincidence. It could not possibly be random. The end-of-day report was sent to headquarters with a special note. New statement from witness Ruth Hernandez is the strongest evidence confirming a group of 3 people was at the scene at the time of disappearance. Third voice giving commands, consistent with Logan's sudden heart rate spike, and the 12 minutes he stood still. Direction of the voice matches the buried nylon bag location. No doubt remains another man was there. The Logan, Maya case had now completely escaped the scope of a simple getting lost incident, not an accident, not a slip, not a mere disappearance, but the presence of a third person, who was involved in the critical moment, and who still has not appeared. After the statement from witness Ruth Hernandez, and the discovery of the buried nylon bag, the investigation direction almost automatically shifted to the most critical question, who was the third person? Among Logan's relationships, only one name was repeatedly mentioned in financial records, old messages, and initial reports from 2023, Colton Reeves. This name had appeared on the edges of the file, not prominent enough to become a suspect 2 years earlier, but enough to make investigators feel uneasy from the very first readings. When Logan returned, details that had seemed trivial before suddenly carried entirely different weight. Old records showed Logan had been involved in an online business project with Colton Reeves, a 33-year-old man with a history of shady deals, who had lived near Henderson, Nevada, before moving to Panguitch, Utah for a short time. When the project collapsed, Logan was left with a large debt, while Colton vanished from contact. In the last message between them, Colton sent exactly 3 words, "I'll find you." At the time Logan told family and rangers, he didn't think Colton was serious, but that message, when placed in the context of Logan standing motionless for 12 minutes at the third footprint location, became a deeply troubling piece of the puzzle. The investigator handling finances began re-examining transactions from 2 years earlier. The information was clear. In the week they disappeared, Logan made a final transfer to Colton, a small portion of the outstanding debt. After that, Colton abruptly stopped all phone transactions. When the team tried tracing his signal, they found his last GPS ping that month was near the western boundary of Bryce Canyon, just a few miles from the entrance. This made the entire team freeze for several seconds. If Colton was truly near the area, at the exact time Logan and Maya disappeared, it could not be coincidence. Surveillance cameras outside the park provided the first crucial piece. At the time, Bryce Canyon lacked comprehensive internal trail cameras, but the entrance area, nearby gas stations, and Scenic Byway 12 all had low-resolution traffic cameras. When the analysis team reopened footage from 2 years earlier, they almost immediately spotted the first detail. 24 hours before Logan and Maya disappeared, Logan was recorded alone in the parking lot near Red Canyon. But he did not head straight to the trail as usual. He stood there for nearly 3 minutes, as if waiting for someone. About 1 minute later, an old silver Ford pickup entered the frame, stopping near Logan for a few seconds. The angle was blurry, but not too blurry to obscure the driver's face. Colton Reeves. Investigators rewound and confirmed multiple times. Colton did not just appear, he spoke with Logan. Logan leaned in, hands braced on Colton's truck door, looking like he was pleading or explaining something. Colton's expression was entirely different. Cold, face darkened, lips pressed tight. The footage showed Logan stepping back, Colton slamming the door hard enough to shake the camera slightly, then his truck driving off toward Bryce Canyon. Logan's final gesture before leaving the frame was putting a hand to his forehead, as if threatened or cornered. One investigator whispered, "There's no way Logan forgot this meeting. Why didn't he mention Colton in his very first statement?" That question opened the possibility that Logan was too afraid of Colton to speak. Colton had lived near Utah and had caused trouble there. When the team pulled Colton's file, details that should have been examined 2 years earlier began to emerge clearly. Colton had been warned by Panguitch police for threatening a coworker in a minor financial dispute. He had temporarily stayed in a cabin, exactly 18 miles from Bryce Canyon. A neighbor once reported hearing loud arguing from his cabin. He disappeared from the area right before Logan and Maya went missing. When these scattered details were placed alongside the third footprint, the buried nylon bag, the note, "Don't let him know," and the video of Colton meeting Logan before the disappearance, the picture began to sharpen. Motive emerged. The financial investigator reported at the meeting, Logan owed Colton about $14,500. Early 2023, Colton was fired from his job. This was when he began repeatedly threatening Logan. Based on message data, Colton believed Logan had cheated him in their joint investment. Another investigator added, Colton has a history of using violence to collect debts. A 2020 incident in Henderson, he dragged someone out of a car and threatened to throw them off a canyon. The victim didn't press charges, but the report still exists. Bryce Canyon, a vast remote place with few cameras, easy to hide anything, became the perfect setting for a confrontation. The biggest question, did Colton follow Logan into the park? When the team searched entrance road cameras again, they found another clip. Colton's truck appeared at the park entrance, just 45 minutes after the Red Canyon meeting. And even more suspicious, he left the park the same day, but with no one in the passenger seat, even though Logan had been standing right by his door earlier. This created two possibilities. 1. Logan refused to go with Colton and still entered the park with Maya, but Colton followed. 2. Or Logan and Colton had a tense exchange right before Logan started the hike, an exchange intense enough that Logan dared not mention it. Logan's heart rate spiking right before standing motionless for 12 minutes, at the third footprint fit perfectly with the theory that Logan was confronted by Colton at that very spot. Moreover, Logan's words "we weren't alone," when viewed alongside the Colton video, were no longer vague, they became indirect confirmation. Colton Reeves officially became suspect number 1. In the latest report, the investigator wrote one short but pivotal line, "Clear motive, history of threats, presence in the area, met Logan before disappearance, matches description of third voice." No doubt remained, the man standing on the ridge, the one who said "don't turn back," the one who made Logan stand frozen in fear for 12 minutes, was most likely Colton Reeves. The Logan-Maya disappearance was no longer a mystery swallowed by nature. It had a flesh and blood suspect, someone with direct conflict with Logan, who was present at Bryce Canyon on the exact day they vanished. After the name Colton Reeves was officially added to the suspect list, the forensics team immediately began reconstructing the entire scene. They could not rely on Logan's fragmented statements, nor on guesses. What they needed had to come from objective data, from the soil and rocks, from the wind, from the direction of dust fallout, and from the tiny pieces of evidence that had been easy to overlook 2 years earlier. and the first thing that opened a completely new direction was the terrain at the third footprint area, where the nylon bag was found. 3D simulation. Maya could not slip. Bryce Canyon uses annually updated 3D LiDAR laser terrain maps. When the technical team reconstructed the ground surface at the spot where Logan stood motionless for 12 minutes, what they discovered made everyone pay close attention. The rock slope at that location was only about 9 to 11 degrees, far too low for an adult to slip, as Logan described. There were no long skid grooves, no loose rocks or sandy soil slippery enough to cause a free-fall accident. A scene reconstruction expert looked at the model and said briefly, if someone fell here, they had to be pushed off balance. They couldn't fall on their own. The lead investigator asked, off balance by how much? The expert pointed to the model displayed in the corner of the room, 30 to 40 degrees to the right, or an impact at the shoulder. Nature doesn't create that kind of deflection. This is human force. Everyone understood the meaning of that statement. Maya did not fall by herself. Someone pushed her, digging deeper into the dust layers, signs of a struggle. When forensics returned to the third footprint area for another check, they began using the micro-disturbance detection kit, a device specialized for detecting small surface disturbances, even after many seasons of wind. Results on the rock surface were 3 parallel scrape marks about 4 to 6 centimeters long. They were at a height corresponding to hand grips or clutching by someone in a struggle. The direction of the scrapes indicated the person was being pulled or pushed against gravity. Forensics concluded, these scrape marks are from fingernails or a small hard object, very likely Maya's, as she was pulled or pushed and tried to grip the rock. What sent chills through the team was that these marks matched the exact spot Ruth described hearing the third person's commanding voice, "Don't turn back," meaning Maya was standing right there struggling with someone. At the exact moment Ruth heard the strange voice. Micro-slide analysis. Maya tilted left when falling. Forensic technicians use simulations based on fall direction, rock grip and scrape marks to determine. Maya was pushed tilting to the left. The pusher was standing behind, offset to the right. Logan was standing about 1.5 to 2 meters away, based on his watch movement data. The third footprint position was exactly the ideal pushing angle to unbalance a victim in that terrain. The person standing behind Maya during the struggle, if the simulation was correct, perfectly matched the size of the third footprint. Breakthrough evidence: DNA under Maya's fingernails. The nylon bag containing Maya's torn shirt and hair was rushed to the Utah State Lab. Investigators did not expect much, as 2 years is a long time for DNA to oxidize or degrade, but the sealed nylon had inadvertently preserved some biological samples. When analyzing a broken fingernail fragment stuck in the shirt hem, technicians discovered human skin cells, tiny flakes, too small to see with the naked eye, caught in the fabric underneath. The sample was sent for DNA sequencing. When the results came back, the investigator had to read it twice to believe his eyes. The DNA under Maya's fingernails matched Colton Reeves. Not Logan, not a stranger, not an error. Match probability, 1 in 2.4 billion. The technician stated clearly, this sample wasn't casual contact. This is DNA left from forceful interaction, like Maya tried to scratch, claw, or fight back. This fit perfectly with all the terrain data, rock scrapes, push angle simulation, and Ruth's statement. One veteran investigator said quietly, if Maya fought back, she felt danger. This wasn't an accident. This was conflict. Sequence of tears. Maya was attacked before falling. When forensics built a 3D model of injury sequence, based on torn fabric samples and thread breakage, they determined the tear in the shirt at the left shoulder occurred before Maya fell. The tear angle matched a backward pull from behind. Fabric with low concentration blood, smear type, not pooling after a fall, meaning Maya was grabbed by hand, not injured by rock impact. One expert said, she turned and was pulled. There's no way she leaned or lost balance on her own. Notably, the shirt tear was at the shoulder, the exact spot the push force simulation showed victims are often impacted from behind the shoulder or near the arm. The commanding voice of the third person Ruth's statement now became the perfect fitting piece. Third voice, low rough, the pitch of a man older than Logan. Tone, commanding not warning. Content, keep going, don't turn back. Distance very close to the victims, under 3 meters. When investigators compared this description to interviews with people who knew Colton, many used the same words: rough, gravelly, unpleasant voice, typical of a long-time smoker. This match could not be ignored. Final inference from scene simulation when all data was combined: terrain, scrapes, DNA statement, third footprint. The final reconstruction simulation was projected on the large screen in the case meeting room. It depicted Maya turning when hearing someone approach, Colton appearing from behind, likely using threats, Logan standing a short distance from the two, heart rate spiking as the situation spiraled out of control, Maya trying to back away, grabbed by Colton at the left shoulder, Maya clawing at the rock wall, leaving scrape marks, she fighting back, leaving Colton's DNA under her nails, Colton shoving off balance at the shoulder, causing Maya to lose footing and fall off the edge, Logan standing frozen, as the GPS and heart rate data showed. The investigator stood up, looked around the table, voice lowering, no doubt left. Maya was pushed, and the person who pushed her was Colton Reeves. But the truth had only traveled halfway. One person had returned alive, but the third person still had not shown his face, and the biggest question remained unanswered. After Maya disappeared over the edge, what happened to Logan for those 2 whole years? The investigation entered a more serious phase, and Colton Reeves, from a minor name in old files, now stood at the very center of the entire case. After the scene simulation confirmed Maya could not have fallen on her own, and the DNA under her fingernails matched Colton Reeves, the investigation team knew it was time to confront Logan Pierce directly. He was the only one who had stood there, the only one who heard the third voice, the only one who survived to return, and he was also the one who had stayed silent about Colton during all the initial statements. No more delays. The lead investigator, along with 2 specialists, entered the hospital interview room, the most tense meeting since the day Logan was found in Tropic. Logan sat with his head down, hands clenched so tightly, his knuckles were white. He no longer looked as ragged as before, but there was a different kind of tension, suppressed fear, like someone who knew something horrific was about to be forced out of him. The investigator placed the sealed nylon bag on the table. When we found this bag, we knew right away someone was trying to hide the truth, he said slowly. And the DNA under Maya's fingernails isn't yours, it's Colton Reeves. Logan looked up, eyes wide. He swallowed hard, breathing quicker for a beat.
Hi?
I already told you, we weren't alone. The investigator took another step. You weren't just not alone. We have video. You met Colton right before entering the park. Logan recoiled in his chair as if pushed. You found that video.
Yes.
And you never mentioned that meeting in any statement. At that moment, Logan began to crack. He stared down at the table, hands trembling slightly, the muscle in his neck twitched repeatedly, as if forced to confess a truth that had haunted him for 2 years. Finally, he spoke in a hoarse voice mixed with fear and shame. Colton followed us into the park. This, though the team had been almost certain for a long time, when heard from Logan's own mouth, still changed the atmosphere in the room. No doubt left, Maya and Logan had been followed. The investigator continued. Why did you hide that? Logan narrowed his eyes, staring straight at the wall. I was scared. I thought if I said it, Colton would. He stopped, unable to finish the sentence. The investigator clarified. Colton had threatened you before. Logan nodded. He always said, I owed him. He said I owed him money, or something else. I didn't know he was coming for us that day. I didn't think he followed us into the park. I didn't think he would. Push Maya. The investigator asked directly. Logan was silent for a very long time. Finally, he answered in a voice barely above a whisper. I didn't think anyone would actually do it, but he did. For a few seconds, the interview room fell into absolute silence. The truth the team had been simulating, analyzing, and piecing together for weeks was now confirmed by the words of the surviving witness. But the investigator was not finished. Logan, you have to tell us every detail. What did you do when Maya was attacked? Logan pressed his fingertips together, eyes blurring with tears. No, it wasn't like you think. I didn't push her. I didn't touch her. He stopped, because the rest was too painful to say. I just stood there, the investigator repeated, voice ice cold. Stood there. Exactly as the GPS data shows, you stood motionless for 12 minutes. Logan, why didn't you help Maya? Logan broke, voice cracking. I couldn't. He threatened me. He told me to stay still. He said if I turned back, he would kill me too. I believed him. I knew he was capable of it. The investigator stripped it to the core. You stood there and watched Maya get pushed. Logan burst into tears, not dramatic sobbing, but the exhausted kind, heavy as stones dropping on his chest. I didn't kill Maya, he said, choking. I swear with everything I have. I didn't kill Maya. The investigator remained cold. But you left Maya alone. Logan nodded, no strength left to deny. I know I was a coward, but I didn't kill her. Colton was the one there with her. He touched her. He pushed her. You just stood there, the investigator repeated for the second time. That sentence hung like an invisible verdict. Logan buried his face in his hands, his whole body shaking. I don't want to hide it anymore. But I also can't. I can't say everything. I don't remember it all. I don't know what happened after. I just remember his voice, and the sound of Maya disappearing. The investigator noted it in the record, then looked at Logan for a long moment. Logan, this is no longer a story about an accident. This is an assault, and a push. And you are the most important witness. But if you keep hiding or twisting the truth, you will become part of the crime. Logan looked up, eyes red. I know, but I didn't kill Maya. I didn't kill her. I swear. He repeated that sentence 3 more times, each weaker than the last. On the outside, Logan Pierce had returned. But in that small interview room, it was clear he had only come back halfway. The rest, the true memory of the day Maya disappeared, remained locked between his fear of Colton Reeves and the psychological devastation of 2 long years. One investigator later wrote in his notes, "Today Logan started to break, but breaking doesn't mean the whole truth has been told." And that was the most frightening part. The interrogation stretched into the second day since Logan was found. His spirit had already crumbled from facing the DNA evidence and the scene simulation showing Maya was pushed, but the investigators knew Logan had only admitted what he could no longer deny. The part he volunteered, the real events among the 3 of them, remained locked in fear and guilt. That night, the interview room held only the dim yellow light spilling onto the cold steel table. Logan sat motionless, arms crossed over his chest, as if trying to hold himself together. The lead investigator entered, gentle but firm. He sat down, placed the file on the table, then said nothing for nearly a minute. A long silence, long enough for the hum of the air conditioning to become the only sound. Finally, it was Logan who broke the atmosphere. His voice was so soft it sounded like he was talking to himself. "You want me to talk about the argument between the 3 of us, right?" The investigator nodded slightly. "We need the whole thing. No more half-truths, Logan." He took a long breath, then closed his eyes, as if forcing himself back to the moment he had tried to forget for 2 years. Colton appeared shortly after they entered the trail. "We had only been walking a few minutes," Logan began. "I heard footsteps behind us, heavy steps, the kind from someone angry, someone who didn't want to be left behind." He opened his eyes, looking up, pupils tired but honest. "I knew it was Colton. I recognized his footsteps right away." The investigator asked, "Why didn't you mention this in your first statement, when you returned?" Logan swallowed, throat tightening. "Because I knew, if I opened my mouth, I wouldn't be able to stop, and I was afraid he would show up any time. I didn't dare believe he had lost track of me. I was scared of him, even after I was rescued." The investigator shifted tone. "What did he say when he approached you two?" Logan let out a short, bitter laugh. "He said his first words like we owed him a meeting. 'So you're here.' That's what he said. Then he asked, 'Where's the money?'" "Money?" Logan nodded. "I owed him. I had hidden that from Maya. The argument erupted right on the trail. Colton stepped forward and blocked our path. He stood in the middle of the trail, hands on hips, like he decided who got to keep going and who didn't. How did Maya react? The investigator asked. Logan pressed his lips together. She stepped in front of me. Maya wasn't exactly scared. She was angry. She asked him what he was doing there, asked why he was following us. He laughed and told her not to get involved in men's business. The investigator jotted quickly in the record. So the three of you argued? Yes. Me, Maya, and Colton, all shouting. I tried to keep Maya behind me, but she pushed my hand away. She told him he wasn't allowed to threaten me anymore. Maya stood between you and Colton. Yes. She blocked him from me. Three voices, matching the 2023 witness statement. Logan's hands trembled. I know you have a witness who heard three voices. Yes, the three of us were arguing. He called me a coward, a liar. Maya told him to get lost. And I just wanted it all to stop. Did you touch Colton? No, I avoided him. I didn't want trouble. Did Colton touch Maya? Logan was silent for a very long time, then nodded slightly. Yes, he grabbed her shoulder. That was the sentence the investigator had been waiting for. A direct admission confirming the DNA under Maya's fingernails. The moment Maya fought back, she pushed him away, Logan said, voice starting to shake. Maya wasn't the type to let anyone touch her. She yelled, "Leave me alone." Then they struggled. I stepped back. He was bigger than me, stronger than me. I knew he could beat me to death right there. And that's when you stood still. Yes. Why? Logan clutched his head, voice choking. Because he turned to me. He said, "You move, I kill you." That's what he said. His eyes weren't normal. I believed him. The investigator lowered his voice. Your heart rate spiked to 148 at that moment. You were panicking. I was terrified. Logan replied, voice full of shame. I knew he had been following me for weeks. I knew he lost his job because he thought I cheated him. I knew he had prepared everything to make me pay. When he looked at me, I knew he meant it. The decisive moment, Logan ran away. When did you run? Logan drew in a breath, like someone inhaling smoke. When Maya yelled at me, "Go Logan, run." I didn't want to listen. I wanted to stay, but when Colton let go of Maya and came toward me, I couldn't think anymore. Which direction did you run? Anywhere, Logan said. I didn't look at the path. I just saw him, saw his eyes. I heard Maya yelling behind me, but I didn't turn back. I knew if I turned back, he would kill me. The investigator pressed on, unrelenting. Did you go back to look for Maya right after? Logan shook his head, body shaking. I know, I panicked. I ran until I couldn't hear anything anymore. You left Maya alone with Colton. Yes, you were the only one who could have helped her, but you ran. Yes. The investigator looked deep into Logan's eyes. But you still claim you used no violence, didn't touch Maya. Logan sat up straight, eyes bloodshot but fierce. I didn't push Maya. I didn't touch her. I didn't make her fall. He paused, then continued in a voice almost breaking. I just couldn't save her. The investigator tilted his head. You admit to abandoning a victim in danger, but deny causing injury. Logan nodded, tears falling onto the cold steel table. I was a coward. I admit that, but I didn't kill Maya. He's the one who killed Maya. He pushed her. He's the one who touched her. He's the one who made her fall. I didn't do it. I just ran. He repeated it, this time weaker, as if the weight of the words was crushing him. I ran away, but I didn't kill Maya. Logan Pierce had finally admitted nearly the entire truth. Colton's presence, the three-person argument, the struggle, the shouting, and that he had turned his back and fled. But one major gap remained unfilled. Before he ran, what exactly happened between Colton and Maya? And after Logan fled the scene, what happened to him during those 2 years of disappearance? Those questions still hung in the air. After Logan admitted to the three-person argument and confessed to running away, the investigation team understood they could not rely on his memory to know what happened to Maya after he vanished from the scene. The most critical question, how Maya died, remained buried among the crevices of Bryce Canyon. But as soon as forensics concluded Maya was pushed off balance, the special SAR search team was reactivated for the first time since the case was shelved as a cold case 2 years earlier. This time they were not searching for a missing person, they were searching for a body and for the truth. The simulation data provided wind direction, push angle, and potential fall points. When the investigator lightly tapped the map, circling a small area near the hoodoo maze, all the rangers understood, if Maya had truly been pushed from that spot, her body could have been swept into one of the deep crevices the previous search teams could not access. The weather was unusually favorable, so the search began the very next morning. First discovery, a sun-faded scrap of fabric. The SAR team spread out along the simulated fall path. Just 40 minutes later, a young ranger shouted, "Something here." Everyone rushed over. Beneath a hidden ledge, worn by sun and wind, was a small grayish-silver scrap of fabric, faded to the point of being hard to recognize. But the stitching and weave matched perfectly with samples from the jacket Maya had carried. Forensics confirmed immediately. This fabric scrap was torn before falling here. This isn't erosion damage. That meant Maya had struggled, had fought back, and her jacket was torn at the top of the area, exactly as previous analysis had shown. The fabric scrap lay about 80 to 90 meters down the natural slope from where she fell. Not a straight trajectory, but torn by wind, cut by rocks, dragged by the terrain over many months and seasons. Because the cliffs of Bryce Canyon are not just a valley, they are a maze where anything that falls is pulled deep into crevices. The SAR team expanded the search. A bigger discovery, the left shoulder blade. Investigators could barely breathe when a ranger picked up a long, slightly curved bone fragment, still dusted with red soil. Based on shape, on-scene forensics determined with near certainty the left shoulder blade of a young woman. Experts whispered to the commander, "The fracture site shows a green stick break, meaning the victim was still alive when the bone broke." This was extremely important. It proved Maya did not die instantly from the fall. She remained conscious, or at least alive, for some time afterward. A heavy silence fell. The SAR team leader looked down into the deep crevice ahead, voice choking. If she was still alive, and no one came back. He didn't finish, but everyone understood. Finding the body, hidden deep where wind could not reach. It wasn't until late afternoon that a veteran SAR member discovered the small crevice, a deadfall pocket, where wind wasn't strong enough to sweep sand away, but deep enough to trap anything that fell in. There, mixed among rock debris, was a nearly intact human skeleton. No fabric left, no backpack, no belongings, everything long destroyed by wind and sun. But bone size, biological age, pelvic ratios, everything matched Maya Callahan. Forensics knelt beside the skeleton. No one spoke. One ranger finally whispered, "We found her." On Maya's shin bone was an unhealed fracture, proving she lived at least several hours after the fall. Fractured spine, fractured left shoulder blade, multiple cracked ribs, but no instantly fatal injuries. Preliminary on-scene conclusion, Maya died slowly, not on impact. Final claw marks, evidence she tried to crawl. Investigators discovered on the rock surface, 2 meters from the skeleton, 2 small parallel scrape marks. They matched perfectly with the earlier analysis of Maya's grip strength at the top, but at this point, loose gravel under her hands showed the victim had tried to push up, tried to crawl, tried to find a way out. One forensic technician said quietly, "She tried to crawl toward the light, tried to find someone, but no one came back." No one on the team could stand steady after those words. No signs of aid, no water bottle, no cloth, no items from Logan. The area around the body was completely clean of other human traces. No shoe prints, no belongings, no signs anyone had ever approached Maya after she fell. No evidence of bandaging, placing a jacket, shading from sun, absolutely nothing. This proved 2 tragic truths. 1. Maya lived long enough for someone to have returned and saved her. 2. No one returned. The investigator looked up at the cliff above, where Logan had once stood motionless for 12 minutes. He said softly, as if to himself, "If someone had come before sunset, she would have lived." Final forensic report, cause of death. The forensics lab took 3 days to complete the conclusion. Maya's friends and family waited outside, while the investigation team waited in silence, like the beginning of the entire case. When the report was printed, the lead investigator read every word: cause of death, traumatic shock combined with exhaustion from dehydration, multiple fractures, no rescue during survivable window. Then the most important line: nature of death, abandonment in life-threatening condition, without aid, despite viable rescue possibility. Forensics clearly stated, Maya did not die from the fall, she died because no one saved her. Not Logan, not Colton, no one. Legal responsibility, both Logan and Colton at fault, but in different ways. Initial legal analysis showed, Colton performed the push, the direct act placing Maya in mortal danger. This was active violence. Logan fled the scene, did not alert rangers, did not seek rescue. He left Maya while she was still alive. This act constitutes abandonment of a victim in danger leading to death. The investigator marked the file: 2 men, one who pushed, one who ran. Maya died between those 2 cruel choices. No one in the investigation room spoke after that conclusion was read. They only flipped to the final page of the report and stopped at the last sentence. The victim could have survived with timely aid within 1 to 2 hours post-injury. 2 hours, just 2 hours. In those 2 hours, Maya was still alive. In those 2 hours, Logan could have returned. In those 2 hours, Colton could have panicked and come back. But no one did anything. And that was the truth, crueler than any push. When Maya's skeleton was lifted from the crevice and placed in the transport bag, one ranger stood silent for a long time, staring into the vast space where wind swept through thousands of rock spires. He said quietly, but loud enough for everyone to hear, "We finally found her." But the truth doesn't save anyone. Maya was taken to the forensics lab for official identification, while the investigation team prepared to enter a completely new phase, from searching for a victim to pursuing the person who caused the tragedy, and questioning the one who abandoned the victim to die. The case now had no room for ambiguity. Maya had been found, the truth had been written down, and Bryce Canyon had finally given back its answer, the most painful answer in the entire disappearance. The discovery of Maya Callahan's remains, along with the forensic conclusion that she lived for several hours after the fall and died from being abandoned, put direct pressure on the investigation team. If Maya was still alive, that meant at least one person had left the scene while she was still breathing, and if the scrape marks, bone fractures, footprints, and DNA under her fingernails all pointed in one direction, that name could be none other than Colton Reeves. After an emergency meeting, a federal arrest warrant was signed that very night, launching a manhunt not just to close Maya's story, but to place Logan and Colton side by side, under the lens of the law for the first time. At dawn, the next day, U.S. Marshals tracked a faint SIM signal that popped up on the outskirts of L.A., a dusty desert town in Nevada, where Colton had once hidden when dodging creditors or cutting off the world. They surrounded the old wooden house where Colton was staying, but he didn't run, didn't resist. He simply opened the door and stepped out with a strange smile, as if he had known all along this moment would come. "You're later than I expected," he said, voice casual like everyday conversation. As he was handcuffed, he glanced at the police vehicles and added a sentence that made one agent frown: "I've been waiting 2 years to tell my side." And the moment he was brought back to Utah, Colton started talking before investigators even asked a question. He sat down in the interview chair, leaned both hands on the table, stared straight into the camera, as if sending a message to someone, and said, "Logan pushed Maya. I never touched her." The opening statement was too clear, too clean, too prepared, and that was exactly why it wasn't believable. The lead investigator didn't respond right away, just placed a photo of the crevice scene, where Maya was found in front of Colton, then asked very slowly, "How far were you standing when she fell?" Colton answered without hesitation, "About 2 meters. Logan lost it," they argued, "and he pushed her down. I just stood there." When the forensics technician placed the photo of the DNA traces under Maya's fingernails on the table, Colton blinked once. The only moment he lost control, but regained his composure immediately. "Maya grabbed me as she fell. Instinct. I didn't push. The investigator looked at him, saying nothing but sounding alarm bells in his head. The explanation was rehearsed, but it didn't match the fall angle, the center of gravity simulation, or the impact sequence released by forensics. When the interrogation moved to confrontation, Logan was brought into the adjacent room. The moment he heard Colton's name, Logan went pale, voice shaking but not choking. He threatened to kill Maya. I ran because he pointed a gun at us. This was the first time Logan mentioned a gun. The investigator noted it immediately. But when pressed for details, Logan changed the story, not pointed directly at Maya, but held up to threaten. A small change, but enough to create a major hole. Because forensics had determined that at the conflict point, there were no signs of drawing a gun, no shell casings, no scattered running footprints. Logan said he ran immediately, but his wearable device proved he stood motionless for nearly 12 minutes after the fall, right at the third footprint location. The investigator asked directly, "What were you doing standing still?" Logan turned his face away. "I panicked. I didn't know what to do." But forensics knew that time was enough for him to see Maya was still alive, and enough for him to choose to leave. When the two statements were placed side by side, the truth didn't become clearer, it only grew more complicated. Colton claimed Logan pushed. Logan claimed Colton threatened to kill Maya. Neither mentioned going back to help her. Neither mentioned that Maya lived for hours after the fall. Both were cutting out the parts they wanted to hide. In the war room analysis meeting, the lead investigator marked the key points on the board: Colton's DNA under Maya's fingernails, the third footprint, the Bryce Canyon map section crossed out exactly at the conflict area, history of threatening Logan, and Colton's presence near Utah at the time of disappearance. One investigator said, one man had motive for violence, one had motive to run, but only one touched Maya right before she fell. Another added, but both abandoned her to die. That was something no one could deny. To strengthen the arrest warrant, the investigation team worked through the night, matching Maya's injuries to push-motion simulations. Everything pointed to a force applied from left to right, matching Colton's dominant hand. While Logan was right-handed, his simulated position could not produce the same fall force. When all the data was pieced together, the official arrest warrant for Colton Reeves was issued, directly involved in the death of Maya Callahan, creating life-threatening danger and violent conduct at the scene. As officers entered the room to take Colton away, he didn't react, just gave a cold smile. "I'm not the one who pushed. He is. Want the truth? Look who ran first." The investigator replied in a calm voice that sent chills. "We will find it, even if both of you are trying to hide it." Colton was transferred to federal detention, hand still cuffed but smile unchanged, as if he believed Logan would break first. Logan was kept under special supervision, because everything he said from now on would be evidence, and every silence too. After 2 years lost in the shadows of Bryce Canyon, the case finally had two men standing in the light of investigation, one who pushed, one who ran, and the truth was slowly tightening around both. When Colton Reeves was handcuffed and taken to federal detention, and Logan continued to be held in the interview room, under special supervision, the investigation team finally had in their hands all the data pieces they had collected over 2 years. GPS locations from both phones, heart rate data from the biometric watch, movement timelines, matching the footprints left on the rock, fall simulation traces, the crossed-out map, witness statements hearing a man shout, "Don't turn back," Colton's travel route into Utah, and especially the forensic conclusion, proving Maya lived for many hours after the fall. All those elements were fed into a 4-dimensional timeline model that the forensics team reconstructed. Starting from the last moment, Logan and Maya were seen walking side by side in Bryce Canyon, and when the model was complete, everyone in the strategy meeting room understood they were about to witness a truth that left no room for doubt. Everything began at the turn into the remote side trail, where Logan's heart rate spiked dramatically according to the watch. This was the moment of the initial argument. Logan's and Maya's footprints overlapped in a pattern exactly matching two people facing each other directly, no more than half a meter apart. The push force simulation created by forensics from gravity data showed Maya was thrown off balance to the left, matching Logan's dominant hand, while Colton's initial position in the timeline was nearly 40 meters away, unable to reach in time to push Maya as he claimed. This immediately eliminated Colton's entire story that Logan shoved Maya while he stood watching, because the simulation showed the fall occurred in less than 1.2 seconds from the peak of the argument, and Colton's footprint had not yet appeared at that moment. Conversely, data from Logan's smartwatch recorded a sharp arm jerk motion like a shoving action, followed by a heart rate spike into the alarm zone, perfectly consistent with the behavioral model of causing an accident in an emotional outburst. Maya fell along a trajectory, matching a sudden push, not a slip as Logan had once claimed, and certainly not being pulled as Colton suggested. But the cruelest point was the subsequent data stream. Logan stood motionless at the cliff edge for exactly 12 minutes and 17 seconds. Forensics reconstructed the line of sight from Logan's position at that time, showing he could fully see down to where Maya landed. More importantly, based on scrape marks and scattered rocks, Maya did not fall into a completely hidden spot. She lay on her side, motionless but not buried under debris. She was still alive, and medical evidence confirmed she lived for several more hours. That meant Logan knew, or at least had to see, that Maya was still alive, right when he stood there. So why didn't he go down? The answer emerged when the third footprint was inserted into the timeline. The strange male footprint, matching Colton's stride length, appeared right behind where Logan stood. At the exact moment, Logan's heart rate spiked a second time. The distance between the two sets of prints showed both men facing each other. The rock compression simulation indicated Colton was blocking the direct path down to where Maya fell, and this was the key point. The 2023 witness had reported hearing a man shout, "Don't turn back." When reopening the witness reenactment audio file, the sound expert determined the voice did not match Logan's, but was much closer to Colton's pitch. Thus, during the 12 minutes, Logan stood still. Colton had appeared, not before the fall but right after it. Colton did not push Maya, Logan did. But Colton prevented Logan from turning back to save her. He stood blocking the crevice opening, making Logan afraid to step down, partly from fear of Colton, partly from panic over his own actions. Logan's statement about Colton pointing a gun did not match the scene evidence. No fleeing footprints, no physical evidence, but forensics assessed this detail could be a distorted memory from fear, or something Logan added to lessen his responsibility. However, Colton threatening Logan to stop him from going down, a form of psychological coercion, fit all the data perfectly. No one knew exactly what they said to each other in that moment, but both stood there for nearly 4 minutes, before leaving in two different directions, abandoning Maya where she lay. The timeline described the rest too clearly. Maya lived for many more hours, trying to crawl toward the light, but succumbing to exhaustion. Logan ran away, telling no one. Colton left the scene looping westward, avoiding cameras. No one came back. No one called the Rangers. No one saved Maya. When the timeline model ended, the lead investigator slowly wrote in the report what no one had enough evidence to state for 2 years. Logan caused the fall. Maya was still alive. Colton threatened and prevented Logan from returning. Both walked away, leaving her to die in the crevice. When the report was read aloud, the room fell silent enough to hear a pen drop on the table. No one argued. No one objected. Because for the first time since the day Logan and Maya vanished in Bryce Canyon, the truth was seamless. Not Logan's truth, not Colton's truth, but the only truth written in rock traces, heartbeats, wind direction, footprints, and the final echoes Maya left on the dry cold red stone of Bryce Canyon. Maya did not die from the fall. Maya died from being abandoned, and two men, one who pushed, one who blocked, both had to face the law. When the entire timeline was fully assembled and the final truth emerged, Logan shoved Maya during the argument. Maya lived for hours after the fall. Colton appeared immediately afterward, and threatened Logan to prevent him from going back to save her, and both left the scene abandoning her to die in the crevice. The case file was transferred to the Washington County Prosecutor's Office, with 2 volumes so thick that the physical evidence section alone required 3 boxes of documents, and from there, the legal process moved faster than anyone expected. Logan Pierce was indicted first on 3 main charges: negligent homicide for causing the push that led to fatal injury, abandoning a person in peril for knowing Maya was still alive, but failing to help, and obstruction of justice for false statements, concealing GPS data, and deliberately crafting misleading testimony over 2 years. Colton Reeves faced 4 counts: criminal intimidation, coercion to prevent rescue, reckless homicide as an accomplice for blocking Logan from returning to save Maya while she was still alive, and interference with a crime scene for intentionally concealing the truth and leaving without reporting. Both pleaded not guilty at the initial arraignment, but no one in the courtroom believed them anymore, because the truth had been etched into the forensic data and Bryce Canyon traces in a way no one could bend. The trial lasted 8 days, with scientific evidence serving as the prosecution's strongest weapon: Logan's heart rate, footprints matching the push position, fall simulation, scrape marks, bone fractures, proving Maya lived for many hours, and especially the 12 minutes Logan stood motionless before leaving, all projected on the large screen, making the jury feel the stark gap between statements and reality. The core issue was no longer who pushed, but who could have saved Maya but chose not to, and the answer was both. Logan for causing the push, and for running away, Colton for appearing right after, and blocking any chance of Maya's survival. When the prosecutor presented the final simulation of the 2 men's movements at the edge, the courtroom fell completely silent. He said, "If either of these 2 men had called the Rangers within 30 minutes, Maya would have been saved. She didn't die from the fall, she died from being abandoned." Logan's defense attorney tried to argue that he was in a state of panic, that Colton's threatening presence prevented him from calmly calling for help, but the prosecution only needed to show the cell signal map of the area, where coverage was strong enough, along with the path Logan ran through without alerting anyone. For Colton, the defense claimed there was no evidence he threatened with a gun, but the prosecution countered, "Gun or no gun, the footprint data and the don't turn back." Witness proved Colton intentionally prevented Logan from taking life-saving action. On sentencing day, the courtroom was packed. Maya's family sat in the front row. Logan sat with his head down, while Colton leaned back in his chair, eyes still carrying that familiar defiant look. The judge read Logan's sentence first. "Defendant Logan Pierce, the court finds that your actions, causing the push resulting in severe injury, knowing the victim was still alive, but abandoning her for hours, making false statements, and deliberately obstructing the investigation, constitutes serious criminal responsibility. The court sentences you to 28 years in prison." Logan's shoulders slumped, but he showed no reaction, as if that heavy sentence was still lighter than the truth he had carried for 2 years. Then it was Colton Reeves's turn. The judge looked straight at him, voice unwavering. "Defendant Colton Reeves, the evidence shows you not only threatened Logan Pierce, but prevented rescue action, depriving the victim of her chance to survive. The court finds you directly responsible for the death of Maya Callahan, as an accomplice in reckless homicide. The court sentences you to 36 years in prison." Colton gave a half smile, not one of victory or defeat, but as if he believed he wasn't the only one who deserved to be in prison. But the verdict closed all debate. 2 men, 2 different roles, 1 death that should never have happened. When the trial ended, the lead investigator walked out of the courtroom in silence. He had once said this case had no heroes, only 2 men who chose themselves over a young woman's life. And today, the court's judgment had recorded that on both sentences, like a period at the end of the chain of tragedy that lasted 2 years in the crevices of Bryce Canyon. Maya finally had her voice, not through others' words, but through legal truth. She died because she was abandoned by 2 men who should have saved her. When the judge left the bench and the final gavel sounded in the thick air of the courtroom, both Bryce Canyon and the Utah community felt a wave of aftershocks spreading wider than anyone had predicted. The 2 sentences, 28 years for Logan Pierce and 36 years for Colton Reeves, not only closed the question of who was responsible for Maya Callahan's death, but also forced the entire system to re-examine safety gaps once dismissed as natural risks, when in reality, Maya's death was not caused by nature, but by 2 wrong human choices. Just 3 weeks after the trial, Bryce Canyon National Park held an emergency meeting with all veteran rangers. They reviewed every old video, reread every report from the day Maya disappeared, and for the first time, they accepted that the park had allowed a years-long vulnerability, too many unmarked side trails, surveillance cameras only on main routes, and no requirement for visitors to report their direction when turning into remote areas. One ranger said during the meeting, voice choked but firm, "If we had known that day that Logan and Maya went into the Hidden Narrows branch, the search team could have intervened before dark." No one responded, but many looked down at the table, as if they too carried an invisible share of responsibility. The park decided on comprehensive changes. All little-used side trails now require pre-registration, solar-powered cameras were installed at remote junctions, and sound alert systems were placed along dangerous areas, so visitors could call rangers with a single button press. A new sign was erected at the entrance: "When you enter the remote areas, leave a trace of life, so we can find you before it's too late." Those words appeared after a meeting with Maya's family, people who had lived 2 years in waiting, unaware their daughter lay in a crevice, alive for many more hours, with no one coming to save her. When receiving the final forensic report, Maya's mother hugged the file folder, as if it were the only thing left of her daughter, then said, "I don't want to blame anymore. I just want to know she didn't die for nothing." She didn't shout, didn't scream. She only told the investigators that what hurt her most wasn't the fall, but that Maya had fought to live, and had been left behind. Maya's younger brother placed a small bouquet at the trail area where she was last seen. The wind scattered most of the flowers within a day, but the ranger on duty always gathered them back and placed them in the original spot. One young ranger shared with the press that he always felt guilty, even though it wasn't my fault, because the park had once viewed disappearances as natural risks, without considering they could stem from human conflict. The case's aftershocks also spread to the hiking community across America. Many outdoor forums began threads about trail safety between people, something few had thought about before. Some posts shared that nature isn't as scary as the wrong decision of a companion. Public opinion didn't attack Bryce Canyon, but they shared Maya's pain as a lesson: silence can kill faster than height or falling rocks. Meanwhile, Logan, sentenced to 28 years, sent through his lawyer a handwritten statement, asking it be given to Maya's family, and allowing public release. His handwriting trembled, like someone who had lost many nights of sleep. The statement had only 3 lines: "It wasn't an accident, it was the wrong decision by both of us. I accept my part." When this statement was read at Maya's memorial on the edge of Bryce Canyon, where the wind still swept through the hoodoos like a long sigh, many people fell silent. Not because Logan admitted it, but because the truth was too clear. Maya didn't die from a natural accident, didn't die from getting lost or lack of skill. She died because she was abandoned, while she still had a chance to live. And Bryce Canyon, in an effort to atone for its invisible mistakes, dedicated a small space at the trailhead, not named, no photo of Maya, just a wooden sign reading, "Don't leave each other behind." Rangers said the sign wasn't to memorialize Maya, but to warn all future visitors: her death didn't happen because of nature. It happened because 2 people knew they could change the outcome, and didn't. The final aftershock of the case wasn't the sentences, or the regulation changes, or the press conferences. It was the community facing the truth head-on. Not every tragedy comes from nature, but sometimes from cowardice, hatred, or a silence lasting 12 minutes. Enough for one person to die. Bryce Canyon remains beautiful, vast, breathtaking, but now that beauty carries a quiet reminder of Maya Callahan, the one who fought to live until the very end, waiting for someone to come back, and finally given her voice through justice. And in the place where wind blows through thousands of rock spires, that call still echoes as the final reverberation of the case: don't abandon each other. In the Logan Colton, Maya case, what shocked the American public was not just the tragic death amid Bryce Canyon, but how 2 very small human decisions led to an irreversible outcome: a shove in a moment of anger, and 12 minutes of silence, while a life waited to be saved. In a vast country like the United States, where millions love hiking, long-distance trekking, climbing, and exploring nature, this story reminds us that danger doesn't only come from heights, weather, or terrain, but also from lack of emotional control, disregard for each other's safety, and fear leading to irresponsibility. Logan only needed 1 second of lost composure to push Maya, but his 12 minutes of standing still is what chilled many Americans, because that was time enough for him to call the Rangers, activate an SOS signal, or at least seek help. And Colton, by using threats to stop Logan from going back, turned himself into an accomplice in the tragedy, a clear reminder that violence, intimidation and control never affect only the intended target, but can take the life of someone completely innocent. For today's American community, the most important lesson is personal responsibility and responsibility toward one another. When in nature, always leave your itinerary, always travel in groups, always report anything unusual, because one sound, one small trace can save a life. And in everyday life, remember that every impulsive action, a shove, a threat, a moment of abandonment, can have consequences far deeper than we imagine. Bryce Canyon has changed its regulations to prevent another tragedy, but the greatest lesson lies in the heart of every American: never let silence, fear, or anger control your decisions when someone else's life depends on you. If you want to keep following cautionary stories like this Bryce Canyon case, remember to hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any investigation journey. Thank you for staying with us until the end of the story. See you in the next video, where we continue uncovering the truth behind unsolved mysteries.